Hello, hello. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for our author talk with Bridget Liang, author of the queer YA novel What Makes You Beautiful. My name's Miranda. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Women's Program Officer here at the New Haven Pride Center. Before we begin today's program, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we're hosting this program. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Skytycook, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the Native people whose lands you occupy and the history of the place you're in. Find out more about Native lands at native-land.ca. Now, I'm so excited to welcome you to today's program. The Lavender Lit Book Club was founded last year as a way of bringing people together over shared stories and celebration of queer and trans women authors. We're delighted to be partners with People Get Ready Books, our favorite local bookstore, to host monthly group discussions and author talks. This month, we read What Makes You Beautiful by Bridget Liang, and you can find out more about future discussions and author talks like this one on our website. Throughout 2021, the Center also looks forward to bringing you more programs just like this one, and you can learn more about upcoming events at newhavenpridecenter.org. And finally, before we begin, we'd like to thank our sponsors who made today's program possible. A huge thank you to CT Humanities and People Get Ready Books for co-sponsoring this event. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Nicholas Dion for coordinating our ASL interpreting today, and a special thank you to CM for providing the ASL interpretation tonight. If you'd like to know more about sponsoring programs like these, please reach out to us. And now, let me introduce the star of tonight's program, Bridget Liang. Bridget is a mixed-race, queer, trans-feminine, neurodiverse, disabled fat fangirl who came into their queerness in Hamilton, Ontario, and co-founded Radar Youth Group at the LGBTQ Wellness Center The Well, the first queer group in a high school in Hamilton, and were instrumental in the passing of an equity policy in the HWDFB. They're a PhD candidate in Gender, Feminist, and Women's Studies program at York University, a community researcher, workshop and group facilitator, performance artist, and fiction writer. And much of their work revolves around intersectionality and arts-based research. Thank you so much, Bridget, for joining us. It's such a pleasure to meet you, and I'm so excited to have you here tonight. And with that, I think you have an awesome excerpt of your book for us.
Yep. So I'm going to be reading from chapter 20 of What Makes You Beautiful. And the chapter is entitled, Can't Contain This. With the new year, I began experimenting more seriously with this new me. This kind of genderqueer / non-binary me. Robin let me borrow his old clothes. He brought them to school and I try and wear them all day to see how they feel. I'm lucky that we're the same size. In the end, I decide that his style isn't for me. He likes bright colors and mermaid and or galaxy-themed outfits. It's a little over the top for me. I'm already in hot enough water with the parents over the clothes I bought at Value Village. If I were to bring home some of Robin's clothes, no. I'm not planning on coming out to them, at least until I'm safely moved out and in university. Maybe not even then. A few weeks into the winter term, I'm busy planning out how to play Fermat to Kyle's Andre. They're the two new owners of the opera that Phantom takes place in. There isn't that much to their characters. In the movie version, they seem pretty stuffy and boring. Kyle and I are sitting on the stage when Ms. Brown interrupts us. That's inappropriate, she says in a soft voice. I blink in confusion and look up at her with a frown. What's inappropriate? Those pants you're wearing? And that top? You're not supposed to show off any midriff, and the front of the pants is much too tight. I can see your underwear. I kindly ask you to change, she says, not at all kindly. I start to apologize and get up to grab a change of clothes from my locker. But then Kyle responds. Logan's midriff isn't showing. Their shirt rode up a little, see? He pulls down my shirt, showing that it actually covers up all my skin. Ms. Brown really scowls at us. She is fidgeting furiously with the gold cross at her throat. She looks like she is trying to hold in a nasty retort. The moment of awkward silence is broken when she says, Fine. She walks off to talk to the mom of one of the girls who volunteered to help out with costumes and props. Logan, I'm sorry that I used they and them pronouns with you, Kyle says suddenly. I did it after the winter concert, too. Once again, I blink, confused by what is being said to me. I have to ask him to repeat himself before it sinks in. They. Kyle used they to refer to me today and when talking to my parents about the nail polish. I didn't realize that Kyle did that, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. And then I am sure. It sounds all right. It's fine, I say. I guess you can keep on using they them pronouns with me. I don't have anything better to use at the moment. Thanks for looking out for me just now and for checking yourself. I have a lot to think about. Kyle is so hot and cold with me. He is really protective of me, but so are my other friends. And then he'll switch to being distant and not talking to me. Phantom rehearsals eat up our time together as a group. Robin and Micah, as the male leads, spend a lot of time away from the rest of us. On the one hand, I'm envious of their lead roles. On the other hand, I love that I don't have to spend time with Ms. Brown or pretend that I'm interested in Stephanie. I try not to be petty, but Stephanie has everything I wish I had. She has the role I wanted. She is dating the guy I have a crush on. And she is blonde and straight and pretty and has everything given to her on a silver platter. One day during rehearsal, she tells me she loves my new look. She asks me if I want to come to her slumber party. And I feel even more guilty because it's not just an act. She really is a Disney princess. And what does it make me? As I work on Fearman's character, I think about how I could make him more queer and interesting. Maybe he's in a relationship with Andre, but that would mean that I'd have to get closer to Kyle, and that is definitely off limits. Kyle's likes girls, and I am not a girl. And even if I became a trans girl, I am nothing like Stephanie. So I make Firmin an eccentric gay man with an unrequited crush on his business partner, Andre. Firmin will be into wearing a lot of furs and jewelry. He'll be really pretentious. He'll act wealthier than he actually is because he came from the slums and faked and swindled his way up. He ends up becoming a co-owner of the opera house with his partner in crime, almost literally. I share this with Kyle. He gets excited and says, "That's really creative, and it makes a lot of sense." They live in the late 1800s when everything is sexually repressed, especially being into men. And coming from the slums gives him a good reason to be stuck up. And since you came up with that idea, I think I should also make Andre gay. He'd have a secret crush on Fairman, and they met while both were selling fake jewelry on opposite corners of the street. Then teamed up and made a killing. What do you think? I grin at Kyle. I feel really warm and gooey inside that he takes my idea and makes it even better. Yeah, I really like it. Really like it. He grins back. It feels so wrong and so right at the same time. It feels like we have something between us, but he's straight and I'm not. And it never ends well when the gay boy, or non-binary person, falls for the straight boy. Drew approaches me when everyone leaves after class. Hey, Logan, I was thinking you might want to talk to Drusilla. Now that's odd. Why would I want to talk to your mom? Isn't she busy working? Yeah, she is, but she does have time off. I just think you'd really benefit from having an adult to talk to, he says it with an easy smile. I know he's leaving something out, but I trust that it isn't anything that will hurt me. All right, thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate everything you've done to help me out. And if there's anything you need my help with, I'll be there. Are you free today? He asks. Drusilla will be home in a couple hours. I do all the cooking, so you're welcome to stay for dinner. Sure. Maybe we can make something together, but I'm only beginning to learn to cook, I offer hesitantly. Drew's face lights up in a way I've never seen before. Really? You want to help me cook something? I'd love to show you how. I just hope I don't burn water or something equally embarrassing. See you at the front door in 10 minutes? I gather my books. Sure, see you in 10, he says as we walk out of the auditorium and off on our separate ways to our lockers. And so that was just one chapter of my novel.
Absolutely amazing. It's really nice to be able to hear it in your voice for the first time, having read it very recently. And you left on such an exciting and crucial moment. I really love that scene with Drusilla that happens after. So that's really awesome. This is just a reminder that if anyone has any questions or comments for our lovely author here, please put them below on Facebook or on YouTube, and I'm really happy to be able to ask them for you. But to begin, so Bridget, tell me a little bit about your journey into the realm of writing fiction, and how did you get your start here?
Okay, I'm trying not to tell everything because a lot of authors, we definitely ramble. I was always kind of a creatively inclined child. Words and language are kind of one of my things that I do a lot of. But I guess this all began with the publication of a thing that I wrote for a class assignment was actually accepted into an anthology for trans speculative fiction. And if you choose to read it, please be mindful of a lot of trigger warnings, content warnings. It is very violent. There is a lot of sexual violence, and it's about zombies. So it's absolutely it is absolutely a violent piece. It was written during a time when I was not doing the best emotionally, but it was very politically charged and it entertained the editors. And it is from there that I was given an opportunity to attend the first trans feminine writers retreat, and that was an amazing experience in New York City, hosted by Topside Press. And I was also given an opportunity by a friend who knew a publisher from Lorimer Press, the people who publish this.
Yeah.
Because they were always on the lookout for more writers who are younger and had experiences from marginalized communities. As someone who fits a number of marginalized communities, and I had a little bit of a writing prompt that I had come up with maybe a couple of years before that, and they liked the prompt, and this is what became the book.
That's really awesome. So, as you said, this is a novel written for young folks. And in a lot of our email exchanges and just before this event, you talked about writing for your younger self, right? As a person who really needed this story and to hear this work. So, what is it that you really came in wanting to say to your younger self? And what is it that you hope your young readers get out of this book?
I guess the thing that I really wanted to say was hope.
Mm-hmm.
That I could have nice things, that I could have a future. In academia, we talk about futurities, which basically means you have a future. You exist in the future.
Mm.
Instead of this world where everyone is white, who is heterosexual, is able-bodied, we want to imagine a world where people are all different kinds of ways of being in the world, all different identities, experiences, and existing in the future and having the things that they want in their lives. And I remember actually when I was 16, that's when I found my first queer book, actually, and I was just coming out. Tanya Huff is a Canadian fantasy sci-fi author who is very close to my heart.
Yeah.
And I read her book, The Firestone, which was written in, I think it was 1989. And this was an openly queer book at this time. And just hearing just the first few pages of the book, there was a scene where the character had their sexuality affirmed, and it was like she was talking to me. And I've met her a couple times. She signed my copy of The Firestone. And she was my inspiration for why I'm writing these books, because she saved my life, so might as well return the favor and try to make more representation of kids who could have looked more like me having a happy life.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the audience, Lindsay asks if there's a character in the book that you identified with more than others and why.
I actually put a little of myself in all of the main cast.
As one does, yeah.
Each of the characters, in order for me to be able to feel, I guess, most comfortable writing all of them, I put a little bit of myself in each of the characters. I'm not telling you what parts of me are in which characters.
Yeah.
But definitely there are a bunch of people, bunch of parts of myself in each character.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a common thing for writers, having dabbled in it. So that's awesome. And as we had been talking about this backstage, but this is a story about, young romantic love, in addition to being a story of friendship and self-love. So I'm curious as to what inspired the central kind of romantic love story in this book and how it became so central to the plot. And I'm also curious about your perspective, as you're saying about being partnered now and experiencing that kind of romantic longing, and what it's like to kind of be in a real relationship now.
Okay, so for the first part of the question,
yeah.
Sorry, you'll have to repeat the first few words of it because I can't remember it all at this
point. Oh,
no,
you're totally fine. That's no worries. So as a story that's really about, romantic love, I'm curious as to what inspired that kind of central romantic storyline in the book.
Okay, so firstly, it was a requirement of the publisher. Lorimer Press has very, very strict requirements to follow. And one of which needs to be a cute romance story.
Right.
And that's fine with me. I am an avid shipper. I like to sorry, I'm just watching the ASL a little bit and I'm amused. I like pairing up people. I like romance. It is a large part of who I am. And so I wanted to tell this story because I was single and chronically lonely. If you read any of my other writing, you may see some of how I fueled feelings of anger at the world in regards to oppression, and also the pain of feeling of singleness. For me, it was not a pleasant experience. And I wanted to have a story where someone who is more like me could actually have a happy relationship. And because the last time you've seen a trans woman in a happy relationship, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And reflecting on it now, you said backstage that you're in a relationship now. So how does it kind of feel to have gotten that dream, and to sort of be reflecting back on writing for the teenager, essentially.
I feel actually like a complete person. It's kind
Mm.
of silly, but and goes against a lot of the cultural what is the word I'm thinking of?
Like, norms, yeah.
Cultural norms that you can be a whole person by yourself. I was a whole person by myself, but I'm also someone who really needed or wanted to have a relationship. It was it was my desire. It's simply something that I wanted for my life, amongst everything else. Fame, fortune.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's really wonderful how you have this teenage character and they're able to realize their kind of romantic desires, throughout this narrative. Um, on a sort of a harder note, I think a beautiful part about writing and reading is how healing it can be, especially when dealing with trauma. And this book, while a lot of it is very joyous and youthful, it does capture some, startling moments of transmisogyny, particularly racialized transmisogyny, and racism and sexual violence in the queer community. So, tell me about what inspired you to include some of these moments in the story and how you chose to handle those moments, especially when you're writing for a young audience.
I definitely some of them are definitely based on real life.
Mhm.
Some of them are also fictionalized. Like I spent about 15 years being pretty well single. I had a short stint, I don't remember how many years ago it was now, where I tried dating someone for a bit. It was not very successful, but I spent a lot of time on dating websites, going to events, all sorts of things to find some kind of relationship. And over that time, I have experienced a lot of really terrible things. I received death threats, hate mail, um, sexual violence, all sorts of terrible things. I've gone through a lot of terrible things and have developed a really hard shell because of it.
Mm.
I'm lucky that it made me stronger versus destroying me, but that influenced part of it, and I wanted to not hide the fact that life can be difficult. Like in discussions with other folks from other marginalized communities, um, we can't hide the fact that the world is terrible.
Mhm.
Like police brutality, we can't hide that from if you're black and or disabled and or other racialized communities.
Yeah.
Um, we can't hide the fact that we live in a culture where sexual violence is still pretty normalized and rape culture.
Mhm.
And I wanted to represent some of that. And also that things may not always go so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm incredibly sorry that you had to go through that. Even as, I appreciate how incredibly honest you were able to be. And in telling a story that has this realistic but happy conclusion, even in the face of all of this trauma. So I really appreciated that about the book. The story's heroine, Veronica, also struggles with finding acceptance from their family. And we're exposed to a lot of different family dynamics, from gay dads and adoptive trans moms to accepting cis het parents. So, what inspired the different family dynamics in the story, and the routes that you went with these different characters?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question again?
Oh yeah, no worries. So, what inspired the family dynamics in the story, and the different directions you took these characters in?
Sorry, what inspired them?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Um, family is also a important part of my research right now.
Hmm.
And I wanted to represent a lot of different families because um, a lot of us don't have the best family, but some of us do have better family, and a lot of us have family that's somewhere in between. Like, Veronica's parents are in a happy heterosexual marriage. They work well together, but they don't jive with their child.
Mm-hmm.
That is one story that I know. Jennifer's parents are wonderful, supportive people. They are loving and caring. Micah's
Mm-hmm.
parents are also loving and caring, and these are the good heterosexual parents with accepting families. Um, Honestly, also Jennifer's parents specifically are the kinds who I, I totally have in mind that they're the ones who came to school and yelled at the teachers for being homophobic and racist and all sorts of other things. They are the kinds of parents that I would actually really love to see more of. Um, and yeah, Drew's parents disowned him. That's one of the little things that's not really explicit in this book is he ran away from a terrible situation, ended up as a homeless youth, and ended up in Toronto, where he found chosen family in the form of Drusilla.
Mm.
And I wanted to showcase all the different kinds of families. And yeah, I we have all kinds of people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really kind of beautiful dynamic that develops in the story.
Oh,
Um,
and Kyle's parents, sorry. Gay dads, they
yeah.
can be really great, but they can also be a little bit controlling at times. I wanted them to be people who are well loved in the community, but they're a little bit controlling around ensuring that their son looks good and follows
Mhm.
certain body norms.
Yeah, I think I like that kind of dynamic with Kyle and his parents in the story, right? And that it's realistic, just because he has these gay dads that are very accepting. And I think some of the students might be jealous of that at first. You kind of see that there's a larger family dynamic at play there. And those parents aren't exactly the perfect parents that you'd want them to be. So you get a lot of these different family dynamics that come through. And speaking of, these parents, specifically Drusilla, in our group discussion, we became fixated on a few of the women characters, particularly Jennifer and Drusilla, who are women that really give Veronica permission to be herself. So we were wondering if these were queer women in your life, especially other trans women and women of color that inspired these characters. And if you can speak a little bit about, the importance of relationships between queer and trans women, and, finding those people that cheer you on.
Sorry, that was my phone just alarming with
You're
notifications. So the first part of your question, they are actually original characters. Out of all of the out of all the characters that I wrote here, these are the two that I just straight up designed for myself.
Mm.
Jennifer, I'm trying to remember why and how I wrote her. She was I took elements from a bunch of different people I knew that I really admired, and I'm not going to name any of them, and integrated them into her character. And Drusilla is actually a thing that was an idea that I took from fandom and took in my own direction. There was an author who I chatted with who was always uncomfortable with all of the very male dominated fanfics and so
Mm.
wanted to have at least one female character who was interesting, strong, powerful, had a voice of sorts, and she was always named Drusilla. And so I took that tradition and named one very interesting female character Drusilla. Also, she's a Buffy fan.
Yes, we love that. I really appreciated Drusilla as a character because I don't think we see mentorship relationships between older women and young women in general in stories, let alone enough of these relationships between two trans women. And I thought that was a really beautiful part of the story, and one of my favorite sort of sections of the book, as you were leading into that chapter that you just read. So I really love that. Another question from our book club members, Lindsay, was that they noted numerous references to comics in the novel, and they were wondering what observations you've had about the comic industry, how it's changed over the years to become more inclusive, and what comics really inspired your writing as an author.
Okay, so lots of things there again. I wasn't originally a comic book fan. I'm still mostly a comic book fan, a passive comic book fan. So one of my friends is the reason why I have comic books as an interest at times, and just superheroes and such. My relationship with it is ambivalent. There are moments when it's really great. There are moments when it's absolutely terrible. But that's my relationship with a lot of media in general. And part of the reason why there's such a significant comic book content is also because of the source text I took this from a little bit.
Yeah.
Fandom feelings, because there is significant comic book interest in said fandom.
Yeah, absolutely. And this work is very much rooted in fan culture. Everything from the comics in this book to Disney references and boy bands. So I was wondering if you could speak to the significance of writing what's an explicitly queer trans story for young people immersed in this culture who might not be getting that kind of representation. So, why did you include some of these, fan culture details in the story?
It's me. To be more eloquent than that, I live and breathe pop culture in my own ways. To write something without pop culture is difficult. In fact, my editor had to make me cut large swaths of pop culture because I kept on inserting all the references I could into it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had to be limited to things that will age well, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that kind of dynamic ages well, right? That teenage love of everything in the media. And I think that passes the time test even when the specific references aren't necessarily there. So a question from Roro is, what was it like to write A-listed characters when you're autistic? And do you have any advice for other authors as well?
Honestly, writing holistic characters, I'm afraid my writing is too autistic, to be honest. I don't know if I portray the holistic correctly. Sorry.
Honestly, don't have to be sorry. Snaps for that. And
advice for other authors. I would need a more in detailed question about advice for other authors, because for writing holistic characters, I don't know what I would advise for writing holistic characters. They're more boring.
Honestly,
don't talk about interests. Don't talk about sensory issues. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's honestly the best answer, right? Because got enough representation already for neurotypical folks out there. So that is honestly an awesome answer. All right. So I have a couple more questions to bring us forward, which is that you also work in research and academia. So I'm curious about how your fiction writing informed your academic work and vice versa.
Oh, they've been intertwined like this the whole time.
Yeah.
I was very lucky that in my undergrad, I did my undergrad in gender studies and then switched over to critical disability studies for my master's before returning back to gender studies for my
Mhm.
PhD. And in gender studies, they were more accepting of alternative ways of doing assignments. And so for a large chunk of my assignments, I got away with writing fiction. And
Absolutely.
and mind you, in order to get away with writing fiction, I still had to do a lot of research and work. So one of my more infamous assignments from my undergrad was about fetishism of Chinese and Asian people in gay male communities.
Hmm.
That's where my life was at the time and experiencing things. And yeah, I wrote a story and I still ended up with about maybe 20 citations
Yeah.
in order to be able to speak to all of the stereotypes that I embedded into that little story. And I carried this tradition of writing fiction for assignments into my graduate degrees. My thesis paper was partly a story about cat-like aliens,
Awesome.
and my PhD is partially about how we can write stories as a way to convey research with
I
autistic
love that.
parents.
As a public health nerd who's also interested in theater and creative writing, I might steal some of that for future assignments.
Digital storytelling projects. This is what you really want to look into.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, with that, we're coming up at the end of our time. And if there's no final questions from our audience, I just wanted to ask you, what do you want folks to take away from tonight? What's the message that you want to leave them with?
That everyone is worthy of having their dreams come true.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank
And
you.
what I mean, and to expand upon this a little further, a lot of us who are marginalized in multiple ways, we have barriers to having our dreams come true, whatever those dreams are. Um, and be it dating, employment, healthcare, education, a lot of these are barriers for us. And so we're all worthy of having our dreams actually come true. And I see a question.
There's a question just before that. It was a beautiful conclusion. But I do want to get this final question in, which is there anything in the book that you would see happening differently had the characters been in the US instead of Canada? And you and I had just talked about this, the Canadian elements of this book that I think I had a hard time picking up on, but I wanted to give you the chance to actually talk about this as well. So, what do you think makes the book so rooted in Canadian culture specifically?
Well, firstly, I unfortunately don't know how to write American. So that's just the first thing. I assume that firstly, let's see. Kyle's parents would probably have to have really good jobs with benefits because healthcare. He may not actually be alive. Jennifer might be dead, uh, or not be in the best of places. Um, hmm. Drew might not actually have survived either, period.
Yeah.
Because lack of social services, although I could have reshaped it where Drusilla rescued him. Drusilla probably would have been deported and never have made it to the US. I mean, she might have made it to the US, but she may not have been able to transition or afford transition. A lot of different things would probably have been different. They may not have had as ready access to a youth group and things that are good for them, depending on also what part of the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 50 states, lots of different things there. You talked about, starting this youth group when you were in high school too, for
Yeah.
for folks like yourself. What was that experience like, and how did that inform this particular book, which is also about young people who are going through similar types of youth groups?
Yeah. So, okay, it's a little bit complicated. So when I first came out at the age of 16, uh, I was situated at a very, very crucial moment where the very first youth group showed up. And it started literally right around the time I came out to my therapist. And it was through the youth group that I was able to get more knowledge and
Yeah.
support and people who actually cared about me and also did good things. And I was also lucky enough to have had some very supportive teachers and this push who was very activisty, and there was this very strong push towards activism. And so with myself and a bunch of my friends, all of us who were queer or a few allies, we started what we called a positive space group instead of a GSA. And it was a good experience. We did some we had meetings, we planned a few events, and we got a little award from the community for the work that we did in our schools. It was great. And also due to some of the things I helped to do, some other schools were able to get their own groups in place. Yeah, 2007 was a very different era from 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine. Well, I think that's all of the questions that we have for tonight. Thank you to our audience members for watching, and thank you so much, Bridget, for joining us. This was really a pleasure. Almost as much as it was to be able to read the book. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And with that, I'll close this off with some final remarks. Thank you for joining us for today's program. Remember, the Center is here for you year-round with our programming, support services, and more. And you can find out all about our upcoming programs at newhavenpridecenter.org. You can also follow us on social media at New Haven Pride Center on Facebook and Instagram, at New Haven Pride on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube, youtube.com/c/New Haven Pride Center. And if you're interested in future Lavender Lit Book Club discussions and authors, you can check out our website to register for our discussion group and buy your books when people get ready books. And finally, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider joining as a member. It's free at newhavenpridecenter.org/join now, or making a donation to support our programming at newhavenpridecenter.org/donate. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, Bridget, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.